March 5, 1963, Kansas City, Missouri, 1:42 a.m. In a cramped dressing room at the Soldiers and Sailors Memorial Hall, Patsy Cline sat with a telephone receiver pressed to her ear, speaking to her husband, Charlie Dick, back home in Nashville. She had just finished performing a benefit concert for the family of disc jockey Cactus Jack Call, who had died in a car accident. In less than 24 hours, Patsy herself would be dead in a plane crash that would shock the country music world. But on this phone call, captured on a home answering machine that Charlie had recently installed, Patsy said something that her family kept private for over 40 years. "I know things, Charlie. Things about this business that could destroy careers, end marriages, ruin lives. And they know I know. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever let me tell the truth." The recording, discovered in 2004 among Charlie Dick's personal effects after his death and partially released by the family in 2011, reveals a woman who had become dangerous to Nashville's power structure, not because she was difficult or demanding, but because she had witnessed too much and refused to stay silent about the exploitation and abuse happening behind the scenes. Patsy Cline didn't die because of bad weather or pilot error alone. She died carrying secrets that threatened the foundation of the country music industry, secrets about how female artists were systematically controlled, exploited, and disposed of when they became inconvenient. This is not the story of a tragic accident. This is the story of a woman who knew too much and spoke too freely, who challenged the men who ran Nashville, and who paid the ultimate price for refusing to play by their rules. This is Patsy Cline's final confession about an industry that couldn't afford to let her keep talking. To understand what made Patsy Cline so dangerous to Nashville's establishment, you must first understand what she overcame to get there. Born Virginia Patterson Hensley on September 8, 1932, in Winchester, Virginia, she grew up in poverty so grinding that she had to drop out of school at age 15 to work and help support her family. Her father abandoned them. Her mother worked multiple jobs. Young Virginia learned early that survival meant being tougher, smarter, and more determined than anyone around her. Music was her way out. She had a voice that could break your heart. Rich, powerful, emotionally devastating. By her late teens, she was performing in local venues, catching the attention of Bill Peer, a band leader who became her first professional mentor. But even then, the exploitation began. Peer controlled her bookings, her image, her earnings. When she tried to negotiate a better deal, he spread rumors that she was difficult to work with. When she threatened to leave, he reminded her that without his connections, she was just another girl from Winchester with a dream. "I learned then that talent wasn't enough," Patsy later told her friend Dottie West. "You had to be willing to fight for every dollar, every credit, every ounce of respect. And even then, they'd find ways to take it from you." In 1953, she married Gerald Cline, taking his last name professionally, even after their marriage fell apart. By 1957, she had her first major hit with Walkin' After Midnight, appearing on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts and becoming a national sensation overnight. But success brought new challenges. The executives at Four Star Records, her first label, owned her publishing rights through exploitative contracts she'd signed when she was desperate for any opportunity. She was making hits and earning almost nothing. "They had me over a barrel," she told her second husband, Charlie Dick, in conversations he later recounted. "I'd signed away my rights when I didn't know better, and they made damn sure I understood that if I caused trouble, they could bury me just as easily as they'd made me." Stop here. What comes next changes everything. The breakthrough and the backlash. 1960 to 1962. When Patsy signed with Decca Records and began working with legendary producer Owen Bradley, everything changed. Songs like I Fall to Pieces and Crazy, the latter written by an unknown Willie Nelson, established her as not just a country star, but a crossover sensation whose emotional depth transcended genre. She was selling records in numbers that rivaled male artists, performing on major television shows, and commanding higher fees for performances. But her success created problems for Nashville's male-dominated power structure. Patsy refused to be controlled. She spoke openly about the pay disparities between male and female performers. She called out promoters who tried to shortchange her. She formed alliances with other female artists, Loretta Lynn, Dottie West, June Carter, encouraging them to demand better treatment, better contracts, better respect. Patsy was dangerous because she wasn't afraid. Loretta Lynn later wrote in her autobiography, "She'd look a record executive in the eye and tell him he was cheating her. She'd tell a promoter his contract was garbage, and she had the talent and the sales numbers to back it up. They couldn't dismiss her as some hysterical woman because she was their biggest female star, so they had to find other ways to control her." One way was through her personal life. When Patsy married Charlie Dick in 1957, he was working class, sometimes unemployed, and occasionally prone to drinking and jealousy. Nashville executives and promoters deliberately fed Charlie's insecurities, suggesting Patsy was being unfaithful on the road, implying she was getting too big for her britches, encouraging conflict in the marriage. If they couldn't control Patsy directly, they'd control her through the chaos in her personal life. Another method was financial. Despite her hit records, Patsy was constantly struggling with money. Her early contracts had given away her publishing rights. Her current contracts with Decca were better but still heavily weighted toward the label. Management fees, booking agent percentages, band costs. By the time everyone took their cut, Patsy was netting far less than male artists with comparable success. She'd have a #1 record and still be worried about paying her mortgage, Charlie Dick recalled. The system was designed that way deliberately. Keep the artists, especially the women, dependent and desperate so they couldn't afford to walk away or make demands. This is where the official biographies quietly skip forward. What Patsy knew. By 1962, Patsy Cline had been in the Nashville music business long enough to see how it really worked. And what she saw was systematic exploitation, particularly of female artists. She witnessed young singers signed to predatory contracts that gave labels ownership of everything they created. She saw promoters demanding sexual favors as the price of booking. She knew of executives who deliberately kept female artists broke and dependent. And she started talking about it. In late 1962, Patsy gave an interview to a small music trade publication where she spoke carefully but pointedly about the ways this industry treats women like property instead of artists. The interview was pulled before publication, reportedly after pressure from industry executives. But copies circulated, and the message was clear. Patsy Cline was becoming a problem. More dangerous were her private conversations. Dottie West later revealed that Patsy had kept a journal where she documented specific incidents. A label executive who had propositioned her and threatened her career when she refused. A promoter who withheld payment from female artists until they cooperated. A session musician who had assaulted a young singer with the implicit protection of producers who didn't want trouble. "She told me she was building a file," Dottie West said in a 1990s interview. "She said somebody had to start holding these men accountable, and if nobody else would do it, she would. She talked about going public, about writing a book when her contracts were up. She said the truth had to come out." Loretta Lynn confirmed this. "Patsy told me to keep my own records, write down everything, because one day we'd need evidence. She said the men who ran this business had gotten away with too much for too long, and she was going to be the one who exposed them." She wasn't afraid of losing her career because she knew her talent was too big for them to completely bury. But the most shocking moment was still ahead, the final tour and the ominous warnings. March 1963. The benefit concert in Kansas City was supposed to be a simple favor, Patsy performing to help the widow and children of a fellow music industry member. She wasn't being paid beyond travel expenses. But in the days leading up to the concert, according to multiple witnesses, Patsy received warnings. Her friend and fellow performer Dottie West later testified that Patsy mentioned phone calls she'd received, Anonymous voices telling her to stop stirring up trouble, to remember what happened to others who didn't know when to keep quiet. Patsy dismissed them publicly, but privately told friends she was concerned. Randy Hughes, the pilot who would ultimately fly the fatal flight, was not Patsy's first choice. Her regular pilot had mysteriously become unavailable at the last minute. Hughes, who managed Cowboy Copas and Hawkshaw Hawkins, the other two artists who died in the crash, was relatively inexperienced with instrument-only flying and had a history of taking risks in bad weather, something Patsy would have known had she done her usual careful vetting. The weather on March 5th was terrible. Low visibility, storms predicted. Multiple people advised against flying. Charlie Dick, on the phone that morning, begged Patsy to take a commercial flight or wait a day. But according to witnesses, Randy Hughes seemed determined to fly, insisting the weather would improve, that he could navigate the conditions. Some later speculated he was under pressure to get the artist back to Nashville for scheduled obligations. Patsy's final phone call to Charlie, made in the early hours of March 5th from her dressing room, was recorded because Charlie had recently installed an answering machine, new technology in 1963, that automatically captured incoming calls. The tape, kept private by the family for over 40 years, reveals a woman who is exhausted, reflective, and strangely resigned. "I'm tired, honey," she says on the recording, her voice soft but clear. "Not just from the show. Tired of fighting, tired of watching my back, tired of knowing things I can't unknow." There's a pause, then. "I know things, Charlie. Things about this business that could destroy careers, end marriages, ruin lives. And they know I know. Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever let me tell the truth." Charlie asks her what she means. Patsy's response is chilling. "If something happens to me, if I don't make it home, I need you to know it wasn't just bad luck or bad weather. There are people in this town who would be relieved if I wasn't around to talk anymore. I'm not saying they'd do anything directly, but if an opportunity presented itself..." She trails off. Then, more brightly, as if shaking off dark thoughts, "But I'm being morbid. I'm just tired. We'll fly out in a few hours, and I'll be home by dinner time. Kiss the kids for me. I love you." The call ended at 1:49 a.m. 14 hours later, the Piper Comanche, piloted by Randy Hughes, crashed in a forest near Camden, Tennessee, killing all 4 people aboard instantly. Patsy Cline was 30 years old, and this is the part the studios never wanted revealed. The investigation that wasn't. The official Civil Aeronautics Board investigation into the crash concluded it was caused by pilot error. Randy Hughes, flying into bad weather conditions he wasn't qualified to navigate, likely becoming disoriented in low visibility and losing control of the aircraft. The report, issued in 1964, found no evidence of mechanical failure or foul play. But the investigation was cursory at best. Several anomalies were never adequately explained. Why did Hughes, who had a reputation for being safety conscious when flying his own family, insist on taking off in weather that multiple more experienced pilots refused to fly in? Why were several pieces of the aircraft's instrumentation never recovered or examined? Why did witnesses near the crash site report hearing the engine sputtering before impact, suggesting possible fuel or mechanical issues? Yet the investigation dismissed these reports. Most troubling, why was Randy Hughes, a relatively inexperienced instrument pilot, suddenly managing the flight schedules for multiple major artists? Who connected him to Patsy for this particular trip? And why did Patsy's regular pilot, who had never before canceled on her, become unavailable at the last minute for reasons he later described as pressure from someone in Nashville to step aside? The Nashville music industry moved quickly to control the narrative. Patsy Cline was remembered as a tragic loss, a brilliant talent taken too soon. But the conversations she'd been having about industry exploitation, the journal she'd kept documenting abuse, the books she'd talked about writing, all of that disappeared from the public story. Her death became about bad weather and pilot error, not about a woman who had become dangerous to powerful men. After Patsy died, the other women got quieter, Loretta Lynn observed. We all understood the message. If you push too hard, if you know too much, if you threaten the wrong people, accidents can happen. Nobody said it directly, but we all felt it. The journal Patsy had been keeping was never found. Her closest friends believe it was in her luggage on the plane, but the personal effects recovered from the crash site never included any notebook or diary. Whether it was destroyed in the crash or removed afterward remains unknown. The woman behind the legend. What gets lost in the tragic story of Patsy Cline's death is who she actually was. Not just a voice, but a woman of extraordinary courage who used her platform to challenge an exploitative system. She was one of the first female artists to demand equal pay with male performers. She was one of the first to speak openly about the sexual harassment and financial exploitation that female artists faced. She was building coalitions, documenting abuses, and planning to go public when her contracts allowed. Patsy wasn't just fighting for herself, Dottie West explained. She was fighting for all of us, for Loretta, for me, for every girl who came to Nashville with a guitar and a dream. She knew the system was designed to use us up and throw us away, and she was determined to change it. Her legacy isn't just the songs, though Crazy, I Fall to Pieces, and Walkin' After Midnight remain masterpieces. Her legacy is the path she tried to forge for female artists, the conversation she started about exploitation and abuse, the courage she showed in standing up to men who held all the power. The recording of her final phone call, when the family finally allowed excerpts to be released in 2011, sent shockwaves through Nashville. Here was evidence that Patsy Cline knew she was in danger, that she understood the risks of speaking truth to power, and that she proceeded anyway because she believed someone had to. The story of Patsy Cline is not about a tragic accident that claimed a talented singer. It's about a systematic silencing of a woman who knew too much and spoke too freely. It's about an industry that tolerated abuse and exploitation as long as the profits kept flowing. It's about what happens when someone refuses to be complicit in their own oppression and the oppression of others. Patsy's final words on that recording, "Sometimes I wonder if they'll ever let me tell the truth," weren't paranoia. They were the clear-eyed assessment of a woman who understood exactly how much danger she was in. Whether the plane crash that killed her was truly an accident or the result of negligence encouraged by people who wanted her silenced, we may never know for certain. What we do know is this: Patsy Cline spent the last years of her life trying to expose systematic exploitation in the country music industry. She documented abuse, built alliances, and planned to go public. And then she died in a plane crash under suspicious circumstances. Her journal disappeared, and the conversations she'd started were quietly buried along with her. "They got away with it," Loretta Lynn said years later, her voice bitter. "They silenced Patsy, and they made sure the rest of us understood what would happen if we pushed too hard. It took decades, before women in country music had anything close to the respect and fairness Patsy was fighting for, and she paid for that fight with her life. Today, when we listen to Crazy or I Fall to Pieces, we should remember that we're not just hearing a beautiful voice. We're hearing a woman who refused to accept that talent and success meant accepting abuse and exploitation. We're hearing someone who believed the truth mattered more than her career, possibly more than her life. As Charlie Dick said when he finally released the recording of Patsy's final phone call, she wanted the truth to come out. She knew it might cost her everything. And in the end, it did. But she'd want people to know she didn't die just because of bad weather or a pilot's mistake. She died because she was dangerous to people who couldn't afford to let her keep talking. That's the truth she never got to tell. So I'm telling it for her. Patsy Cline's voice was silenced on March 5, 1963. But her final confession, that quiet acknowledgement that speaking truth in Nashville could cost you your life, echoes still. A warning and a challenge to every artist who wonders whether silence is the price of survival.